So the first thing I want to talk about is backing. Backing is fantastic for strengthening fabric. If I wanted to make this stronger, this voile that I made the yukata out of, I could back this with a chiffon, and it would make it a lot stronger, and it would create a different fabric essentially, because backing, you are putting another fabric onto a fabric and you're sewing that fabric to the first fabric. Then you are putting the seams together, so you're doubling the actual textile. And you can do that in many different ways. You can put a much stronger textile onto a very loose one. You could put an organza, for example, onto a boucle wool, which would really strengthen the wool. It would make it drop and cow less, if you think about it that way. Or you can do something, like I was saying, you can put something quite light onto something extremely light and create something that just has a little bit more structure. Backing is a fantastic way to deal with this garment, and because they're big squares, it's very easy to back. Before you do the raw edges, you're just putting another fabric on top and sewing it down with the big long securing stitch. So this is one that I made. Now, this didn't need to be backed. This is extremely strong fabric, and this is a very, very heavy robe. But I made it because it's aesthetically pleasing, and I wanted to make exactly this. And these were the fabrics that I had to do it with. It's because of the outer fabric and the inner fabric. It comes from a documentary I saw called The Story of China, that I actually watch most nights before I go to bed, by Michael Wood on the BBC. In the documentary, he finds some old document boxes from the Qing dynasty in China, so from the 1600s to the 1900s. He's found some document boxes from the emperor, a cave absolutely full of them, and they are whittled in this navy blue wood with the lovely cloud design and bat designs and dragons and all the things you would associate with the Chinese emperor. When he lifted the lid of these document boxes, which once held the royal documents, I'm going to show you this. He lifted it, and there was this mosquito repellent or insect repellent camphor paper, which was, I'd say lime, but it was chartreuse, so really yellow green, absolutely gorgeous. And so I had to make it. Once I saw this, I thought I have to make those boxes, but in a yukata form. This is how my mind works. I see things, I see color combinations, and I go, I need to make that, but in a garment. And so I did. So this is extremely heavy. You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't do this, but it's quite comfortable. During really high winter, it is very comfortable because it's 2 layers of linen. It's extremely breathable but keeps you warm. I don't know if anyone would do it. There's no practical reason. It's just about the aesthetics, and it's gorgeous. So what I did is I backed it, and then I have hand sewn the seams down. And this is the kind of thing you can do. Once you start exploring what you can do with the pattern, this is what you can get to. So these seams have been hand sewn, and if you can see that cloud design running through them, you can definitely see it down here on the centre back seam. It looks as if they are pillars in a palace whittled from timber. It's absolutely beautiful, and all throughout it's been backed with the chartreuse linen. Really heavy, but so much fun to work with. This is one where I had to, for example, hand sew the collar on because it literally wouldn't go through my machine. It's that thick. Have a look at this. This is the sash that I made for it. That's how thick it is. It's like cake. It's unbelievable. And when you've got that many layers going around the collar there, it was a behemoth, that's for sure. Here's the sash that I made with it as well. So I wanted it just to peek out at the sides. Do you see that? How the linen just peeks out. So I've pressed it so the seam just pops out a bit. So were you to wear this with the sash completely in blue, you would still get these little pops of the chartreuse, and you would think, what on earth is that? This is all closed up. You can't see any chartreuse at all, except for these little hints on the sash. And then it opens, or someone takes a step in a gust of wind, a mighty gust, lifts the hem, and you see this flash of chartreuse. Absolutely beautiful. So there is no function to this, but there is lots of function to backing, just not to this garment. This is completely born out of aesthetics, and that's the joy of this. You can see something, and you can keep that in your mind for years, and then one day you can actually realize it in 8 pieces of fabric and put it together into a gorgeous robe. I'm going to show you another backed robe now. You may recognize this. It was on the mannequin during the entire course, hiding in plain sight with that big red sash around it for the belt, picking up these beautiful red tones in the Yukata design. This is another robe that I've made, and it's backed. And I wanted to show you this. It's quite a thin cotton, and it wasn't, I don't want to say that it wasn't strong, but it definitely, with the Yukata, you could see that it just shifted a little bit, like that. And I just wanted a little bit of bite added to it. And what I added was this one's sibling. So it's the exact same cotton as this, but it's in navy blue. So you can see here, I've used here the selvage just turned back. I absolutely love it. It's like a stained glass window on the inside. Do you see that? You can create another fabric by using backing in this way. And you can see the turned back edges here, and I've just put some of that. So that's that same voile, but used as a backing material. So the way you can tell it's backed is that you can see the seams coming through the other side. If it was lined, it would be a mirror image of this and a shell on the inside. If you think of it that way, it's another mirror image and it's attached. You call it marrying. When you put the lining into a garment, you marry the lining to the garment. It's an absolutely gorgeous term. But this is backing, and this is about strength. You literally back the fabric. But it just shows you what you can do. And if you turn that inside out, that's completely wearable, isn't it? You've made another fabric with this haunting, sort of mysterious, beautiful ikat design running vertically down it. I thought I'd show you that. And you may have been curious about this throughout the course and wondering, well, what's in that one? He hasn't told us about that. Now I have, and now you know. I've shown you how I backed fabric and how I've used it creatively to either create an ambiance or to create a memory, rather than the functional use, which is there. It is very functional if you need backing, and I've talked about that and how it can be used. And that's the thing. Often you will make this choice for function's sake, not aesthetic's sake. So this is one where I've definitely used it for function's sake. This is tussar silk, so that means it's raw silk. The silkworm has lived and it's climbed out of the silk, which means it broke the silk cocoon and broke the mile of thread, which means that there's lots of little pieces. So it has more of a textured feeling to it, because rather than just one single filament, you've got lots of little fibers coming together and then some really long filaments. So it's really exciting silk to use if you can find it. Raw tussar silk, wild silk, it's got different names, but in India it's called tussar silk, and this is from India because this was a saree. So it's made slightly differently to our yukata that we've made before and to the one that I've got here, because it's made from a saree. So the saree has its own anatomy that you have to work around rather than just a roll of fabric. But they're so much fun to work with. And in this case, I've lined it. Now the reason I've done that, if you can see here, the motif is woven, as I'm sure you would be aware of a saree loom. They loom in these supplementary threads into the tussar silk. So we've got navy blue and silver zari work. It's an extremely expensive saree that we made this from. And here's a close-up. This is from the sash. So this is taken from the saree border. Now, on the inside on the wrong side of this fabric. There is a definite wrong side, because around all of these motifs, I wonder if you can see. Now you can't quite see it with the camera, what a shame, but around all the motifs, the supplementary threads are clipped on the wrong side of the fabric. So behind this motif, on the other side of the fabric, it's not frayed, but it has supplementary threads jutting out in the up, down and right to left directions, because it's woven and then they cut around each one as they're weaving it. So it isn't too thick a fabric and you don't use too much of the fabric. So I've lined this. You might see it when it's lined. Do you see that they look a bit bigger? And I've completely lined this garment. But because it's such beautiful silk and such high quality and such expensive silk, I wanted to respect it. This is a hand-loomed saree. It's a thing of beauty, and I was already cutting it up to make a garment. So I wanted to really pay it some respect. And so what I've done is I've lined it with something called silk page. So if you know the grades of silk, we've got habatai, which is a plain woven silk, and it's very thin, often used for linings and for silk painting. Silk page is the one below that. So before you get to gauze and muslins, which are really widely woven with loose weaves, this is still a tightly woven piece, but it is so thin. So it's the version of voile, but in silk. And so because it's silk, it's so much lighter than that and so much more see-through. But it's a great way. So what I've done is I've lined it with something so light that this garment absolutely floats. Look at that. Look at the way the air just puffs through it. It is still just as light as it would be as if I'd absolutely left it and not put anything under it at all. But I had to because of these motifs. You can really see it there. You see the other side of the motif. And it's not ugly. I actually quite like the look of them with the cut thread, the sort of faux coupé, the look, but it's not what was happening with this garment. This was a trial garment for an even grander even grander experience that we went on to have as we delved into just what India can offer you as far as fabric goes. It's the world. It's just the most beautiful stuff you could ever see. Everyone's known it since the Greeks, since the Egyptians. This is where you go to get your fabric, and this is why. Look at it. Just beautiful. This is part of the palu, so the decorative end of the saree. Down there, you know the part that falls over the arm. This is part of the palu that goes up around the corner, around the collar, and you've got the palu down the back of the sleeve. So when it's being worn, the palu still hangs down the back. So much fun. And again, something else you can do. So you can see here, with the backing you can add strength, but with the lining, in a way you can add nothing. What I've done here, I really haven't added to how the fabric feels, to the actual feeling of the fabric, to what the fabric is. I've literally just covered the inside. And so it's just a light touch. I talked about you just marry it. It's like a kiss between two fabrics sometimes when you're lining. You can just place it in there and it just hangs, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it doesn't do anything to the garment. It just enhances it. Just stunning. Isn't that beautiful? It looks like Celadon pottery. When it's up close, because it moves. And I talked on here with this garment especially because it's so fine. Around the collar, we talked about sometimes you might want to line the collar so you can't see straight through and see all the folding of the excess that goes underneath the collar. That's precisely what I did here. So it has another piece cut just like the collar is, and it's set just underneath it, and so you can't see where the collar has been folded up underneath, and it gives it that look of jade. Like it looks like Celadon or jade, just with this white underneath this beautiful aqua, or the colour of rain. I don't know how you describe that. It's just stunning. But another thing you can do with your fabrics, once you start to explore, you can make something truly luxurious, and that's what that is. This is luxury for a whole new world. That's for sure. Once you've come to terms with the pattern, you've started making them, and you think, I'm going to venture out. What do I want to do? This is oh, it just makes me smile. This is something I made quite a long time ago now, but it's one of the first ones that I ever painted. So this is a great idea, and this is where I talk about the garment is. I'm going to move aside just a little bit. The garment is a canvas. That is one of the best things about kimono. And when you go to a kimono exhibition and you see kimono from, say, the Genroku period, which is in the late 1600s in Japan, in that Edo period, it's a period within there where there was a flourishing of decoration and excess. At the end, it was clamped down upon. There was sumptuary laws put in place because it all just got a bit too heady. But at the time, they made some amazing garments, and that's what inspired me to create this. And then I created things that other people own and we don't look at, but this is mine. This is one that I made for me, and it is a kimono. It's a hitoe. It's made of jupion silk, so really slubbed, textured silk. I wanted it to have warp and weft that you could see. There were little knots where they've retied the weft threads or the warp threads where they've come apart during the looming process. It's hand loomed jupion, and then I've painted it with a gold paint. But then I had other different golds, so different colours of golds, and you can see there's shades through there. And this took months to make because you have to layer it up very slowly, let it dry, and layer upon layer. But this is what can be done once you've gotten used to the concept of the panels and you understand what they are. You've got a few that you can work with, and if you see right up in this top corner here, you make quarter scale ones like the pattern that I showed earlier, how we cut the pattern. That one can be used to plan something like this before you put it down onto extremely expensive handloom silk and paint it with gold. You can try out the pattern first, but this is the kind of thing that you can do once you start to explore the idea that this garment is a canvas, not just a piece of clothing. Can you see here how the layering has happened, and then it writhes around the hem in just this beautiful gold. Here's a good example of all the different colours of gold that were used. Months, it took absolute months. One of my favourite parts was the Banksia. You may have noticed I'm Australian. I spent half my year living there. I spent half my time here. I live in Manchester, and in the United Kingdom. I spent a good part of my year in Southeast Asia on the way to Australia. And I'm Australian. I was born in Australia. I'm a Tasmanian. This is a Banksia, and this is where the inspiration came from. So I'm walking along the beach in Queensland where I live, and these are everywhere, and they're these beautiful trees. The Banksia is a seed cone, a bit like a pine, you can think of it. So how a pine cone is, it's all the seeds and it's its flower, and they flower in an amber colour. They look like, though, the way that they stand, the trees look like they're holding these lanterns up to the sea, because they're all lined along the coast of the sea. It's just so gorgeous. It's so beautiful. And so I'm learning how to make kimono, and I've made a few, and I've been playing around with it. And I've studied them as well. So I've looked through the Genroku period and seen the mind-blowing things that they made, where they used the entire garment was the canvas, not just the little bits in the corners or down at the hem. The entire thing was up for grabs. And so this is what I made. Um, and it's heartbreakingly beautiful. It's just so lovely. The silk as well. I don't know if you can see. There's little parts here where they've tied up where it's broken during the looming process. There's red part. There's like little red threads that they've tied, obviously to say this part was retied. It is absolutely beautiful. And because I never wear this, I just get it out to look at it and and sit in amazement at how beautiful it is. So it still has that crunchy, never been worn silk feeling to it as well. And you can see it just sits out straight. And I finished it with these beautiful 17th century style Japanese sleeves with the tiny little sleeve opening up the top. This is the sort of scale that a kimono would have been made in that Genroku in the first century of Edo, and just before Edo as well, when there was another flowering under the ruler Hideyoshi. They they just made the jaw dropping kimono. The obi was only thin. If you wore one, this could be worn as an overcoat, and then you'd have layers like this underneath. So you might not even wear an obi with it. But the obi sashes at the start of the Edo period, and certainly before it, were very thin. They were like sashes. They were thinner than this on here, not the big obis that you think of from the late 1700s and into the 1800s in Edo in Tokyo. This is when it was more about the garment than the accessories that went with it. It makes me smile, and I hope that you can make something that makes you smile like that when you look at it. It really, it is gorgeous, isn't it? I do remember the hours as I sit there drawing these lines with the paint. I couldn't just sort of scrape in like that. Every stroke had to go like this, and then get more of the gold, and then go around again, and then you get the glue, and you put the gold leaf. It was a whole thing. It was a whole part of my life, and it's fun to look back at it. Isn't that just beautiful? So all of my life comes into my sewing. I've shown you garments made of Thai silk. I spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, so also the Indian saris. A lot of that I buy them in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, obviously in India, but I spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and you can see that influence when I talk about the Thai jupions and the silks that I'm buying from there. I showed you the coastal Banksia robe, which came from me walking along the beach in Queensland, in my home where I'm from in Australia, and now this is definitely my representation of living in the UK. I'm a citizen of the United Kingdom now. I live in Manchester, and this was made actually in Bristol, where I have a place, and I live in Bristol sometimes. And this was from the winter in Bristol, and I lived up near these big gorgeous parks that they have down there in the southwest of England. And in the middle of winter you have pine trees and you have ivy, and until the plums come back into flower there really isn't much else. So you really get to appreciate ivy when you're going on your walks, and they grow on. There's all these beautiful manor houses around where I live where they're covered in this ivy on the brick and the sandstone, and that's where this comes from. This is called winter ivy. So it's this beautiful burgundy silk. This silk is actually from Thailand, and I've lined it. So we're talking about lining before. This is lined with a silk satin, just silk satin as you would think of silk satin. Beautiful. It's nice and thin, but oh, it's cold. It's cold to touch. Even now, it's been sitting in this room. It's still that lovely cold silk feeling of satin, and I've painted this with silver leaf and silver gutta to go around here. So I've made an entire papers. I've got rolls of paper that have this pattern of this ivy scrawled all over it. This isn't random. I planned all this because I needed these to meet up. So that's where you can see this little quarter scale above us again. You use the quarter scale and you use paper to plan out your pattern, and then you transfer it to the silk. I wanted to show you this because it's a mix of all of them. It's lined, it's painted, so I've got you to do both those things. You're having a whale of a time so far. You've made Yukata and now you've advanced to this stage. Now you see I've got a completely different garment. It's a haori. So it's a completely different garment. It's, it's the same. Actually, the sleeves are exactly the same as this one. They're 75 centimeters, so they're 30 inches from wrist to seam. And the rest of the garment is all exactly the same level, and I wanted it like that so it hangs like a wall hanging. But this is a jacket, so it's just making it shorter, and we don't have any front overlaps, you might notice as well. I made belt loops on the inside so you could secure a belt. And the way it's worn is you wear a belt around the inside that hugs the front of your body and the back of your body, but only holds the garment to the front of your body, so the back of the garment hangs down loose. It's a mid-century way, and actually it goes back to the 18th century way of securing a garment to the body, so you have a beautiful barrel line coming down from the neck. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to turn it around. So I've turned it around, and you can see where you get the effect I was going for. I've creased it as I turned it around as well. Silly me. You can see the effect I was going for, where it's a wall hanging. That's, if they all line up, it just looks like one big piece of fabric, and the ivy writhes across it as if it was on a wall down in Bristol. Up around the collar and back down to the hem. Absolutely beautiful garment. It shows you another way you can go. So you can make shorter garments, you can make a little bolero from it. But lining it and painting it, all these things, they're all, first of all, you just play around with the fabrics, and then you start to move into these heavy decorations, and the whole world opens up. And I haven't even started. I've still got embroidery. I've bought embroidery thread, but I haven't started embroidering yet. So there's a whole world still waiting for me, and an even larger one waiting for you at the start of your journey. I'm so excited for you, to be honest. You get to experience all of this for the first time, just like I did. Isn't it beautiful? It's like a book.